Hello from Hollywood. My name is Anthony Boyer. I've been a talent agent in Los Angeles for over 15 years. And today I wanted to talk about some of my favorite films. And joining me is my good friend, Jess Canty. Say hi.
Hi, I'm Jess. I am a talent manager here in Los Angeles, and I've been doing that for about the past 8 years. And I'm excited to be here with Anthony to talk about some of the movies that made us want to do these jobs in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think, all of us started off as fans and then we moved out here, and it's really easy to get into the weeds and not really watch things recreationally.
Yeah.
It certainly skews, this business can skew how you watch things. And also, by the same token, we've been doing all these videos, Jess and I have been doing all these videos on how to get your acting career going and sustaining and everything. And I thought it might be nice to just kind of tell people a little bit about us and what makes us tick and what our tastes are too.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point. Is part of being successful in this business is developing your taste.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, we both believe that you just have to kind of watch everything. I mean, at least, watch the pilot of as many shows as you can each season. See what sticks, see what makes you want to keep watching. Go back and watch those old classic movies that you hear people mention all the time, but you haven't seen. Watch the things that are nominated for, various awards and are coming out of festivals like Cannes and Telluride and Toronto, so that you really can understand the storytelling landscape and figure out what you like, who's inspiring you, who you want to work with.
Yeah, and I like your idea to watch the classics, but also consume new media. And not just large filmmakers either, but smaller filmmakers, because that's likely to be, if you're just starting out or if you're fairly early in your career, that's likely to be the wave you'll be on.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important. So without further ado, I thought we would jump into each do 5 of our own favorite
Sure.
movies. I think I learned personally while doing this, I used to just always have the same things I would say, but I had to sit down and think what are actually my favorite movies? And I learned that if you ask me today and if you ask me tomorrow, I'm going to have a completely different list. Did you find that?
Absolutely. It was very hard to narrow it down to 5. I think we'll probably do this more than once, but I think this first set of films is probably a combination of the things we've watched multiple times, we go back to, things that inspired us, and things that we think, as either an actor or a storyteller, you might be able to learn something from by watching it if you haven't seen it.
So without further ado, our 5 favorite films. I'm going to start with one of mine, and it's a film from 2007 called Superbad.
Love it.
Which is, kind of a goofy, silly comedy. Might not be something people expect to see on a top 5 list. It was written by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. It was directed by Greg Mottola. Stars Jonah Hill, Michael Cera, Christopher Mintz-Plasse. And this movie, why is it one of my favorites? A few things. First of all, I just like comedy. I grew up with comedy. I really enjoy comedy. And it's a superbly done comedy. It is an exceptionally well done comedy. The dialogue is on point. The characterizations are really solid. But I think what elevates it for me is that just the emotion of it is just really authentic. It doesn't feel like this silly over-the-top comedy, even though it certainly has elements of that. There are characters played by Bill Hader and Seth Rogen that are just super over-the-top and not realistic, but there's something about it that just has a lot of heart, and it really spoke to me. I rarely see anything in the movie theater more than once. I saw this 3 times in the theater, so...
It's always a good sign.
Yeah. So I really enjoy that movie, and I thought I would put that first.
I love that. I love that as a choice.
Yeah.
For me, my general usual answer to this question is the 1973 movie The Sting. I think it is one of the best screenplays ever written, just bar none, from beginning to end, from a storytelling perspective. It has one of the best endings ever. I will not spoil it if you haven't seen it. And if you have seen it and you're telling other people to watch it, don't spoil it for them. Let them experience.
He gets stung.
Written by David S. Ward, directed by George Roy Hill, starring Paul Newman and Robert Redford and Robert Shaw. It's set, the world it's set in is just cool. It makes grifting look cool. It makes, it's Chicago in the 30s, I believe. And the chemistry between Paul Newman and Robert Redford is sort of unparalleled. There's a reason why they did multiple movies together. And this, I think, is one of the best examples of that. But it doesn't just rely on their star power. It's truly a fantastic movie on the page. And so they just elevate it. So, yeah, definitely one of the movies that made me want to be in this business. Too young to have seen it in the theaters, but very glad my parents turned me onto it at a young age.
Yeah, what I like about that movie also is George Roy Hill. I feel like it's really hard for many directors to sort of handle leading men, especially of that era where they had all this gravitas and like you kind of had to, your set had to work around them.
Yeah.
And to have two of such a caliber in the same movie,
Yeah.
and he handled it so well. Like I was thinking about that recently watching Boys from Brazil, where it's just like, how do you handle movie stars in this way? And
yeah.
I think it's really cool how he was able to do that.
And
also.
that's true. And you kind of get the sense that like, and maybe it's the director, or maybe it's just the two of them or a combination of it, but they aren't competing with each other.
Right.
There's, and then maybe that's what I mean by the chemistry. It's not like they're trying to one up each other. You really understand from an acting perspective that you can feel that give and take in their scenes. And
so the next movie I want to talk about is 1987's Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, another comedy. Yes, as I mentioned, I really like comedy. This one was written and directed by John Hughes. Now, it stars Jess Canty and Steve Martin, two of my all-time favorite comedic actors. This, admittedly, I do think it's a very good movie, but also there's like a lot of nostalgia in this movie to me. When I first saw it in the theaters, I was on a trip with my dad to Houston, Texas.
Very cool.
It was maybe the only time we ever spent time, just the two of us, and we went and saw this movie, and we were the only ones in the theater. And just like my dad's laughing and I'm laughing. It was just a really nice shared moment. But as an adult, when I revisited it, I thought like, this is actually really, really good. Mm-hmm. It's built in this way with these like sort of stock characters. There's Del Griffith, a sort of a lazy, messy, sort of slovenly character played by Jess Canty, and then Steve Martin plays this very prig, uptight guy named Neil, and it's like an odd couple,
exactly.
Right? It's very similar, but odd couple on the road. But these two actors just elevate these characters so much. There's just so much going on, and it's just like surprising complexity.
Yeah.
And recently the deleted scenes were made available.
Ooh.
And there is like 5 times more movie than is in the movie.
I have to go check that out.
It's pretty fantastic. And just like to see two guys at the top of their game, really just like giving and taking, and John Hughes again, really, one of the best directors and writers of all time, I would say.
Yeah.
It's really a tour de force in filmmaking. I think it's just exceptionally well done. I can watch it every year and still enjoy it.
And still love it.
Yeah.
That's such a good point about the deleted scenes. Anytime there's an opportunity to kind of dig into a film, to watch more, to watch multiple cuts, take advantage of that, especially if it's a film that you love, because I think you learn so much by seeing how much they cut, or, especially in a comedy, which version of the scene they actually chose. And there's 5 other hilarious versions.
Yeah, I think one thing I love about physical media, we grew up with physical media, and things have kind of moved away from it. But if you can, I still recommend it, because the director's commentaries on DVDs, on Blu-rays, is like a filmmaking masterclass in every movie.
Absolutely.
Like, it's pretty fantastic, and it's so hard to get in like digital media. Like, it doesn't really exist in the same way.
I wonder why they haven't ported that over yet.
It's pretty strange to me.
It needs to happen.
Yeah.
It needs to happen. You heard it here first. My next film is Top Gun, the original.
Staying in the 80s.
Yeah, the original from 1986. Written by Jim Cash, Jack Epps Jr., and Ehud Yonah. Directed by Tony Scott. And starring, of course, Tom Cruise, Kelly McGillis, Val Kilmer, Anthony Edwards, Michael Ironside, and Tom Skerritt. This is the movie I've seen the most, for sure. I was obsessed with it as a kid. I probably had a crush on Tom Cruise.
You and everybody
I had a
else.
crush on Tom Cruise. What am I talking about? Probably had a crush on Tom Cruise. Had a crush on Tom Cruise. But as I got older and, started looking at the movie less as a fan and more as, someone who wants to be in this, or who's in this business, and is sort of no longer looking at films as a passive audience member, but actually really analyzing them, there is not a wasted frame in that movie. There is not 1 second that doesn't matter to the story. No, every scene starts as late as possible and it finishes as soon as possible, right? In terms of the storytelling. And then there's just so many iconic moments. And, I think it's no surprise why the sequel did so well, because the original just was such a fantastic movie. And, to your point, that's another one where no matter how many times you see it, you're still you're still excited in every dogfight scene where they're learning to fly, and the tension is there. And again, just really incredible actors.
And I would say in general, if you're just starting out your acting career and you want some guidance, just look at Val Kilmer's beginning of his career.
Yeah.
Like when you look at like Willow and Top Gun and Real Genius and The Doors, he really made so many strong choices at the beginning of his career.
I mean, I feel like Tom did too, right?
Agreed.
Just watch the progression of the things, like you said, the things that they were saying yes to, and how they kind of weren't repeating themselves. Or if they were repeating a character type, it was in a different arena.
Yeah.
And on a bigger scale, or with
because Cruise had done a movie
actors.
called Taps where he played like a military, like a cadet, and this was like a bit different, but like character-wise, night and day.
Yeah,
very
totally different.
So moving on, you had your classic movie. I get my classic movie, and that is 1943's Shadow of a Doubt. It was written by Thornton Wilder, Sally Benson, and Alma Reville. It was directed by the great Alfred Hitchcock. And, there are a lot of, obviously, Hitchcock classics. Psycho, for instance, and Vertigo, and The Birds, and all these great movies. And you might be thinking, why Shadow of a Doubt? Like, it's not one of his better-known movies, but I think it is so exceptionally well done. Joseph Cotton's performance in this movie, I think, is maybe the greatest performance I've ever seen. Like, I think it is that good. It is that strong. And Teresa Wright is really great in it also. It's tense, but not forced. The way that the tension is built is just really organic, and it feels like it's just, you can tell Hitchcock just knows what he's doing, and he knows how to like thread that needle. But also, some of his movies I find have sort of an influence from the studios, whereas this feels just more intimate and smaller, and it doesn't feel like he had to like overdo it, which sometimes I think can happen. It's just a really quiet, really gently paced movie. You're sort of guessing, you think you're 2 steps ahead, but you're actually not the entire time. Keeps you on the edge of your seat really, really well. I just think it's such an exceptional movie.
And, if you aren't familiar with Thornton Wilder, I would say go on IMDb.
Well, you got to watch Our Town.
Yeah. And just responsible for so many pieces of Americana, both for the stage and the screen. And it's sort of amazing when you look at that resume. So
yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, filmmakers of that period really, many had a stage background, and Hitchcock, I don't think, did himself, but he was obviously very fascinated with it. He's British, and there's a strong tradition of the stage there. When you look at something like Rope, it's basically a play with a movie camera. So I think it's really interesting to watch him and Joseph Cotton, who has a great stage background. Thornton Wilder, the writer. It's really, I just think it's so well done.
Yeah. I'm going to jump to 2015 and a film called Inside Out. So, we're recording this now in 2024, right on the heels of Inside Out 2. which so far is the biggest movie of the year. But I wanted to give a nod to the first film because I think as far as Pixar goes, just if we're talking about Pixar movies, I think it's the most original probably in terms of its scope and in terms of thinking about story and taking a nugget of something. You know, Pixar is so good at taking an idea and kind of exploring it in every possible direction. And I think Inside Out's the best example of that. But I also think, you know, it was probably pretty risky for them to go to say, okay, we're going to do this movie inside a character's head and we're going to personify, you know, these emotions and the whole movie is going to be set in a child's brain. I'm sure that wasn't necessarily the easiest sort of pitch, and the way that they create story there is really amazing. Go look that up. Yeah. You know, there's tons of resources about sort of the Pixar method and how they create story and how they create character and sort of the order that all of that comes in. But I think Inside Out is one of those movies that I find myself thinking about it in my daily life, right? It's just sort of sticky. And I think that that's kind of incredible for an animated film. Yeah. That it's, you know, there's something about that form kind of releasing our imagination and allowing us to sometimes be more connected to the story that's happening than when it's live action. And so the concepts in that, the idea of your imaginary friend. I had an imaginary friend as a kid. And so, you know, I'll find myself sort of being like, oh, where did my imaginary friend go?
What was your imaginary friend's name? Uh-oh.
Her name was Singa Ho.
Okay.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Mine was Ghost Mark.
Ghost Mark.
That
makes me feel like maybe children see ghosts.
Maybe.
Maybe that's what imaginary friends are. We're actually seeing ghosts. So yeah. But anyway, so Inside Out, I also of course love the sequel, but for me the original just totally blew my mind.
I'm gonna jump to 2002. When I think about my favorite movie, so I mentioned this earlier, but when people ask what's your favorite movie, for years I always used to just say the same thing. I won't say what it was, but I always just used to say the same thing. And recently I had to think, like, is that actually my favorite movie? Or did I decide at 22 years old that was my favorite movie and I've just said it by rote ever since? And when I really sat down and like really thought about like, what is my favorite movie? I came up with the 2002 movie Adaptation.
Okay.
Now, this is not a lot of people's favorite movies, I would say, but for me, it is just so perfectly executed. It's written by Charlie Kaufman, who I'm a huge fan of. He wrote Being John Malkovich, and it was directed by his many times collaborator, Spike Jonze, who is sort of a visionary to begin with. And if you haven't seen Spike Jonze movies, go check out kind of anything in his catalog. It's so unique and original and forward-thinking and fresh, and this particular movie is the same way. On its surface, it is an adaptation of a book, but when you really get into it, it's sort of explaining how the book is adapted while adapting the book, while maybe not adapting the book at all, while adapting it in many different ways. There's a lot happening. And one thing I think is really cool about this movie is I've seen it maybe 3 dozen times. I've seen it a lot of times. Every single time I notice something that I didn't notice before. And I'm not going to say that that's like the hallmark of great filmmaking, but I think it is really cool.
Yeah.
Just when you notice, like, for instance, in the movie, Nicolas Cage essentially plays Charlie Kaufman, but he also plays Charlie Kaufman's brother. And so there's this back and forth about who's writing the film, and like the tone of the film the macro film changes so much based on which of the two is writing it. I think it just shows a really smart take on the industry itself. I think it shows a really smart take on how to adapt material in a fresh and interesting way. And Nicolas Cage, I gotta say, when Nicolas Cage is on, he's just so good.
Forget it.
And I think this one, he is just super on. I think he just gives a tour de force.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like Adaptation and
Matchstick Men.
Yeah, and Peggy Sue Got Married.
Yeah.
And then
Raising Arizona.
Yeah, Raising Arizona. And then what's the one that came out last year?
The Unbearable.
Yes, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. But an Adaptation sort of feels like that, right? Where it's like it's that kind of performance and you're just like, yes, I could watch you forever, Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
I also love a movie with a title that means more metaphorically.
I love that.
Right?
I
Where
love that.
that title for that movie works on so many levels. And you're just like, if I assume Charlie titled it.
Oh,
but,
sure. Yeah.
But even if it was the studio, you know, even if that wasn't the original title, whoever agreed to make that title stick.
I also have a weird soft spot for titles with punctuation, and I like that it has a period at the end of it.
So true. So you're a Face Off fan?
I am. Yeah, of course. Who wouldn't be a Face Off fan?
Of course, but pretty great punctuation in that title.
Absolutely.
I actually heard
and the title means multiple things.
Well, same thing. And I guess the filmmakers had to fight the studio to keep the slash in that title.
It's very important.
It's very important, but like apparently, you know, it was a whole conversation with the marketing department. So my next film is another classic, but I'm going foreign title this time. Italy had this amazing heyday of filmmaking in the late 40s through to the 60s, pretty much. And I lived in Italy for a year and so did a deep dive on Italian cinema. So there's a million titles. And again, if you ask me tomorrow, it may be a different one. But one of the first sort of, you know, if you're going to learn about Italian cinema, you have to watch Bicycle Thieves. And I think I went into it sort of as being like, okay, I'm going to watch the movie for homework, right? One of those, like, I have to watch this because it's on all these lists. And was just blown away by the absolute simplicity of the story. So, Ladri di Biciclette, The Bicycle Thieves in English, 1948, written by Cesare Zavattini, Luigi Bartolini, and Oreste Biancoli, and directed by Vittorio De Sica. I always am impressed by a movie with very few characters that can hold my attention. I find that probably to be one of the hardest things to do as a filmmaker, screenwriter, actors, right? That they have to kind of be on screen the whole time without a lot of superfluous characters keeping our attention. So that for sure was a big part of why I love that movie and why, as I've returned to watch it, have, you know, continued to love it. In true European fashion, it has a very non-Hollywood ending. And I think, you know, that was something else for me as such a student of American film to start to do a dive on European cinema and really see that difference where they actually aren't sort of under the pressure to have everything end on this upending. And trust me, like, I'm a romantic comedy fan. I love an upending. But there is something to making film that makes us also walk away feeling like we've just experienced some truth about life in the 2 hours that we've been sitting there. And especially with the way that this movie ends, I feel like it accomplishes that for sure.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. That makes me think of, like, I think a film like that, it makes you think about, like, what's the next moment. And I think it's really interesting that in Hollywood we become so focused on sequels and IPs, but we never actually think what's the next moment at the end of a movie. We just cut in on the next movie.
The next movie,
you know,
yeah.
5 years later or whatever.
Well, and you know, now, I mean, they do this so much now that you can tell when the ending is like setting up the next movie.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, and so, yeah, that is really true of the Bicycle Thieves for sure. You're kind of, you're like, oh no, give me more. I want to know what happens.
Yeah.
And you get to make up what you think happens, as opposed to there being Bicycle Thieves 10.
Should we invest in that?
Do it. Bicycle Thieves 10, Ice Road Bicycles.
Ice Road, Tokyo Drift. So I'm going to jump to contemporary cinema, and that's going to be A24's 2022 film, Everything Everywhere All at Once.
I will say, this would have been on my list, but you did your list first. Sent it to me. He stole it. So this one, I mean, not that we don't agree on the other films, but if you hadn't put this on your list, it would have been on mine.
Well, it was on mine.
Yeah, you win.
No, it's honestly, I think, for me, the greatest film made maybe in 2.5 decades. Like, I think it's just such an exceptional film. It's written and directed by Daniels, which is sort of a pseudonym of Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert. It stars Michelle Yeoh and Stephanie Hsu and Kei-Hu Kwan. And it's just... So first of all, I have a personal tie to this. I do have a client who is in a prominent role in this film. And so I was already invested in it. I find that when I watch clients' performances, clients' films, I watch my clients, right? It's just the nature of the business. I'm watching for my client's performance. Very rarely do I really just get swept up in the film. And with this film, I saw it initially actually at a screening before, at a cast and crew screening before it was released, to the public before the festival circuit. And I had to sit there for 15, 20 minutes afterwards, just kind of not knowing what had just hit me, because there's so much to process. It's such groundbreaking cinema, and it's just such a perfect use of special effects, and the perfect use of the metaverse, if you will. I think that's become sort of this very buzzy thing to make movies about.
Yeah.
But this navigated it, I thought, so well, and with such heart and such dignity to these characters that I think normally would be relegated to sort of secondary status, right? This Chinese couple who runs a laundromat. Like, these are not characters that we have seen a lot in Hollywood films.
Yeah.
And to have something that A, puts them front and center, and B, puts them in the middle of a family drama, but also a queer drama, is so impactful for me personally, just as someone who, had a very strained relationship with my parents, when I came out. And to have that sort of the way that this film treats the relationship between Michelle Yeoh and Stephanie Hsu, and their relationship where they love each other,
right?
But there's this like resistance, and oh man, it really crushed me in all the best ways. Yes. And I found it very poignant and very powerful, and also very funny, unexpectedly funny. And it's another one, when I went to see it in the theater, I was like, I don't know if the movie I saw is the movie, because I had seen it so early in the process. I'm like, I don't know if the movie I saw is the movie that everyone else is talking about at this point. And I think it was pretty, if not exactly the same, it was very close. But when I went to watch it in the theater, it was like I was watching it for the first time all over again. It was just so, moving and so transportive.
I agree. Second everything that you've just said. I think the only thing I would add to that, and part of the reason why it's on my list, is especially these days, I like it when story leads the special effects and not the reverse.
Yes, agreed.
And, there are, I can't remember, there's some ungodly number of special effects shots in that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But it's only because it's driving the story. Yep. And at the heart of that, like you were saying, is this family drama. And so, you know, it's almost the special effects are seamless, which is how you want that to be. I don't personally like it when I go to a movie and I go, oh, that scene's in there so that they can use this, you know, tool or whatever.
I think you could take 80% of the special effects out and the movie would still work as a movie.
As a story. Yeah, I totally agree. And I think, you know, it's one of the few movies that feels like modern life.
Yeah.
Right? It does that thing that great cinema does.
Which is funny because it jumps around all these universes and timelines and everything.
But think of our days, right? I mean, we're so multitasking all the time, and we're so drawn and distracted in a million different ways, and they sort of found a way to wrap a really amazing human story in that. So from my last film, we're going to go from 2022 Oscar winner all the way back to 1934. With the first Academy Award Best Picture winner, which is It Happened One Night, written by Robert Riskin, Samuel Hopkins Adams, and directed by the amazing Frank Capra, starring Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. It's, like I said, I'm a rom-com girl. It's the original rom-com, and it won Academy Award. I think one of the things, if I had a beef with where we've gotten, is that somehow there's this sense that things that are popular sort of don't rise.
I can be guilty of that sometimes.
Don't rise to the level of being awarded, and that absolutely wasn't true when the Academy Awards started. This movie was wildly popular, 2 huge stars, and you know, the fact that a comedy and a rom-com at that is the first Best Picture winner, I think that's something for filmmakers today to think about, that maybe that kind of storytelling is important and needed in the culture of all of the stories that we choose to tell. I think it follows, you know, sort of the rules of Aristotle, like Aristotelian storytelling, right? Where, you know, the action, the unity of time, action, and place, you know, it's a little bit of a road movie, so maybe not place, but definitely unity of time and action. It takes place with a very, very limited time frame, and we just come in on these characters' lives. You know, it's before the rating system, so we were under sort of the Hays Code, I believe, and so there's a lot of innuendo. There were things they weren't allowed to show on camera. There's a lot of banter. The dialogue is sort of operating on multiple levels. But you're rooting for both of these characters from like minute one that they come on screen. And they are equally matched, which I love. I love that, you know, at the beginning of filmmaking, female characters were as strong, funny, witty, given all of the things to do that male characters were given to do. And I think this film is a perfect example of all of that.
You mentioned something, you mentioned the Hays Code. I think it's important to point out what that is. So that was like a moral code, like a censorship code, essentially, where films had to sort of pass through these censors. And I think it led to some of the most creative filmmaking to sort of get around that. We talked about Hitchcock earlier.
Yeah.
He was notorious being a Hitchcock movie. He was notorious for finding ways to like show something visually to like
train going through tunnel. Meaning something else.
So it's. I think that it's. I'm glad that we don't have it anymore.
Absolutely.
But it led to so much like creative energy to sort of get the point across.
Yeah.
It really made people focus on the visuals. And at the end of the day, film is a visual medium.
Absolutely.
So there you have it. 5 films from each of us that are among our favorites of all time. Why don't you leave in the comment below? Leave your favorite film. I would love to see what your taste is.
Yeah,
and
let's build an amazing list, and maybe there'll be stuff that we haven't seen yet that we don't know about that we need to go watch.
Maybe we'll judge you. So listen, if you got value out of this video, click that thumbs up button, subscribe, click the notification bell. That way you get alerted every time we post a new video. Thanks for watching.